I actually went to a boarding school. This was the first time that I really started weightlifting. And yeah, I went from about 140 to 180. Some days you got to pull back a little bit too, which is hard to do, especially as athletes. I didn't do that for many years and I injured myself. I stopped eating basically because I didn't know what was going on. That was when I stumbled upon the nervous system training. Physically, I was being affected.
So in today's pod, we have Aaron. Aaron is an amazing story here. He has such a passion for what he does. He's going to talk a blend of neuroscience, neurology with athletic endeavors and training. So this is exactly what we need in our pod. He has many certifications with combining that neurology and movement medicine. He works a lot with athletes with pain management, along with effective training methods and using our own built system, the way our brain likes to function, to find us the best and most effective way to move and to train for the highest success out on the field. So, Aaron, tell us how you got into this and how this became such a big passion for you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Excited to talk about all this stuff because, as you mentioned, I'm very passionate about movement, fitness, training, sports, athleticism, longevity, injuries prevention. Mainly because as you've asked me, has been a big part of my journey. Essentially, I grew up playing sports very early as a kid. From the time I could pretty much walk, I had some type of a ball or something or a bat or something in my hand, and throwing things around, diving on the couch for footballs and getting into organized sports very early on. And yeah, that kind of just over the years developed into passion for movement, passion for fitness and exercise. I played sports, but it wasn't really until I actually went to a boarding school where I really started like lifting weights and getting into a lot of the strength training and that type of aspects. Obviously movement, athleticism, all in conjunction while playing sport.
How old were you at that time?
Well, I went to two different boarding schools, but the second boarding school I went to, I was 17. And it was kind of a strict, what you'd call like a therapeutic boarding school. I was maybe in between my school and everything, was getting into a little extracurricular activities that maybe weren't serving me and, get me into a little bit of trouble here and there. So I went to a boarding school, but it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Because again, like I said, that was where I really started kind of honing in my weightlifting and strength training. And luckily there were sports teams there. I played baseball there and soccer. And when I went into that school, I weighed 140 pounds. And within about 8 months or so, 8 to 10 months, I gained about 40 pounds. I was almost at 180
Whoa,
pounds. Yeah, because I was
dang.
just literally eating, three
And this
square
isn't
meals.
like the freshman like 20 or 30. This is like muscle.
Yeah. I mean, I was 17, so I was a little bit older in a sense, wasn't 14, 15. And like I said, I mean, I'd played sports all my life, but this was the first time that I really started weightlifting. And yeah, I went from about 140 to 180 in less than a year,
It's
which,
crazy.
yeah, it was pretty significant. Basically, just from really eating, just a very regimented schedule, eating pretty well, 3 meals a day and working out 5, 6 days a week and still playing sports at the time. I will say that putting on a lot of that weight hindered me a little bit athletically because you put on that weight, it kind of affects you, but I was able to adjust over time. And that just kind of snowballed into, when I got out of boarding school, furthering my endeavors of fitness really and training, and kind of just fell into personal training and training. I can't really describe it. It was kind of, I mean, serendipitous, I guess, in a way, or kind of meant to be. I would always have friends that would ask me, what can I do for this? Or what can I do for that? Or, how can I gain muscle? Or, how can I lose weight? Or, what should I do? And I remember actually when I moved out to Los Angeles 20 years ago, 21 years ago, I was kind of just looking for a job, didn't really know what I was doing. And, came across Craigslist, and Craigslist at the time was something that was actually legitimate. I don't know what it's turned into now. I've heard some crazy stories about what it is now. I'm dating myself, I'm sure, talking about Craigslist.
I remember those days too.
Yeah. And I remember seeing it was like, personal trainer, $40 an hour. And, 21 years ago as a 20-something-year-old kid kind of thinking, oh, okay, like I like training. I love movement and fitness. And it was funny because at the time, a friend of mine, I was talking to her and she was like, you should be a trainer. trainer because she was asking me all these questions. And I just happened to look at that, and it just kind of, like I said, it naturally fell into place. But then I was like, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I want to do this right. So
Yeah.
I went, I seeked out some courses, and the first course I did was a 6-month, like 500-hour course where we would meet 4 days a week. Yeah, it was 4 hours. We would go to a classroom for about 2.5 hours, and we would go to a gym near where the classroom was for the rest of the, hour and a half. That was 4 days a week for 6 months while I was taking classes at SMC and doing a lot of stuff like that. I really wanted to make sure that if I was going to do this, that, I learned it and I did it right. And I gathered the knowledge and tools and resources to be successful at this. The course I was in was all based off the NSCA handbook, certified with NSCA for close to 20 years now. And then got hired at Equinox, actually, like not very long after that class ended. And I graduated from that class. Equinox in Westwood was opening up, and it just happened to work out perfectly. I auditioned there, got the job there, and trained at Equinox for many years, for about 7 years or so, and cut my teeth there and took many certification courses, through Equinox, which was a great place, a great stepping stone of learning and meeting people, meeting obviously like-minded people in the industry. And again, taking, many certification courses, from New Leaf metabolic courses, precision nutrition, kettlebell courses, you name it, all through. And then, EFTA has their own in-house education, or Equinox, it's EFTI, has their own in-house education as well. So, and then basically after I left Equinox, I went through a very kind of traumatic time in my life. I was going through some personal issues and professional. Equinox, there was some issues going on there, and then there was just personally some family issues, some relationship issues, and then some health issues. And then kind of snowballed into, I started having panic attacks and anxiety and depression, and just a lot of things were kind of going sour in my life. And that was when really I stumbled upon the nervous system training and neuroscience and neurology, because I was seeking methods to help heal me. And, I'd went the conventional route. I was seeing doctors, doing tests, everything was coming back normal per se, right? And they couldn't really find anything necessarily wrong with me.
What were you feeling? What was going on? Like, you had panic attacks. Did you feel like you couldn't do a lot of the things you were doing before physically, or was it a more of a mental process?
Yeah, I mean, it was a combination of all those things, because physically I was being affected. I was having kind of like chest pains and maybe digestive issues and
Ah,
some things. And,
okay.
so doctors were just saying, you have GERD, you have reflux. And it was new to me, it was hard to process. But then, there was also psychological and emotional things happening as well, because the time of relationship I was in, a long-term relationship I was in with my girlfriend, was kind of falling apart. And my family was having some issues as well. And then, like I said, at work, Equinox, there were some things going on because Equinox was being sued. There was a class action lawsuit actually that went through at Equinox that kind of affected us as employees, because there was a lot of things changing and shifting at Equinox. So it was just kind of all of these things at once kind of culminated. So the physical was affecting me emotionally, psychologically, and then the psychological stuff was kind of affecting me physically. And so, yeah, it was just kind of this double-edged sword where it snowballed into, just this anxiety and panic attacks out of nowhere. I'd wake up out of the middle of the night, kind of wake up just heart pounding, sweating, kind of not really knowing what was going on, just feeling really out of sorts.
That's terrifying, because before that, none of this was ever a thing, right?
Not really. I mean, I do think that there was probably, some anxiety and maybe some minor depression throughout my life that I wasn't like as keen to or aware of, maybe that I had been through, but maybe just ignored or wasn't very conscious of it. And then I think it just all came to a head around that time, about 10, 11 years ago or so. It all kind of just came to a head with everything that was happening. And at that point, it just kind of really just hit me. And then that was when, like I said, kind of go the conventional route, talk to doctors, and they want to give me medications, and had an endoscopy and had all the tests and all those things, and said kind of was just coming back as normal and wasn't really feeling satisfied, was kind of feeling worse with some of the things that was happening. And so that was when
Yeah.
I was like, you know what, I don't want to live this way. It was really kind of a catalyst for change. And I talk about that a lot with clients and just people in general, that often trauma, injury, emotional trauma, psychological trauma, those are major catalysts catalyst for change, for better or worse. I mean, it is what it is. And I will say that some of the worst times I've been through actually were major catalysts and jumping off points for me to change. And I'm grateful for those experiences. You don't look at them at the time as that you're in that process, and you maybe don't have the wherewithal or the conscious awareness sometimes. But when you come out of that, hopefully, not everybody does. I mean, some people it takes more trauma than others, or less trauma. Some people maybe never really kind of learn those lessons, unfortunately, or we don't change things. But I feel fortunate that trauma was a big catalyst for me to want to change my life and look at things maybe differently. And even though I was a trainer and I was technically healthy, I had gained a bunch of weight. I wasn't moving as much. I wasn't happy. I was, a lot of things going on. So
Was it that physically you just couldn't do what you were able to do before because of the health issues?
there was some of that. I think it more kind of snowballed into, it was more kind of emotional, psychological from
Okay.
some of the physical, because yeah, the physical problems were definitely affecting me. And what happened was I stopped eating basically because I didn't know kind of what was going on. And
Right.
I used to walk around at about 185 pounds, and I got down to about 170. I lost about 15 pounds in about 2 months or so because I was just freaking out. I stopped eating. I didn't know what
Yeah.
was going on in my system. So I was definitely being affected physically. I wasn't working out as much. I was definitely, was affecting me. But I will say too that movement did help in some ways, because it wasn't like I was so physically incapable that I couldn't really move or do anything, but I wasn't being as consistent, and it was affecting me for sure. But I will say that as I continued to work through those things, movement was a huge part. One of the biggest pieces of that puzzle of healing myself was continuing to move. But I definitely shifted my ways of movement and my ways of training and my approach to, fitness and health in general. And, like
Yeah.
I was saying, that was where I stumbled across some of the nervous system and holistic, and tapping into the parasympathetic nervous system, and acupuncture and movement therapy and breath work and mindset and meditation, and started reading books, like The Power of Now, and,
Mm.
letting go of the pathway of surrender. And then that just opened up these pathways of finding this new knowledge and these new resources as it pertained to healing myself, first and foremost, through my own nervous system, through various modalities of health and wellness. And, like I said, mindset, nutrition, it
Yeah.
was all physical, mental, emotional, all putting all those things together and finding ways to nurture those systems.
So you're studying all this and you're trying to figure out how to get you back to your status quo. So how did you end up getting there? Or did you not and you just took a different path?
Well, it was a huge shift in my life, as I was saying, where my status quo, I guess, changed. My ideas of health and wellness and just my habits and a lot of things, shifted. And it was a process. I mean, as you know, with anything that we do, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a never-ending process. I'm still working on it to this day, 10 years later. I'm still utilizing the modalities and techniques and knowledge that I've learned, but it's also shifted my way of being to where, what I'm doing now isn't what I was doing 10 years ago. My
Yeah.
mindset, my habits, my discipline, the way that I live my life, the things that I do now, the way that I move. I've implemented many new habits and strategies in my life and in my lifestyle that have kind of just shifted my whole being completely. But again, this took years, I mean,
Yeah.
I would say the first couple years was a struggle, there was a lot of work being going on. And then I'm still working on it, as I said, to this day. I'm still continuing to find new tools and knowledge and resources, and learning how to move differently, and continuing to just try to grow and better myself. And it's never linear, right? Process
Right.
is never
Nope.
straight up. It's always back and forth, and it's all over the place.
Yep.
And so
No matter
just
how much you want it to be.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think sometimes too, and that I think that's where the fitness industry oftentimes, misses the mark, and often in sports as well, because in sports, unfortunately, there's a pressure to have a certain trajectory, right? And sometimes if you don't meet that trajectory, or you don't maybe meet those milestones, then it can be disheartening. You may lose a spot, you may get down on yourself, you may not be,
Right.
so, unfortunately, I think there's a lot of that where, we have to remind ourselves that there's still going to be good days and bad days. Part of it is showing up and sometimes doing the work when maybe you don't want to do the work. That can be part
Right.
of it. But, some of it too is understanding yourself, maybe nurturing your nature a little bit. And as athletes, we're very hard on ourselves, growing up.
Mhm.
there was a lot of pressure on me in and of myself and my coaches and my dad and whoever else was, oh, you can do better, you can be better, you're strong, you're this, you're that. And so it's, when you fail or maybe don't perform as well as you think you could, or again, like I was saying, maybe that progress isn't happening as quickly as you want it to, or, you're seeing other people maybe making different progress or whatever, that can be hard. That can be challenging, psychologically and mentally. But, a big part of it, like I said, is it takes time. Consistency is part of that. Frequency is part of that. Doing it, challenging yourself and maybe you don't want to, but also understanding that some days you got to pull back a little bit too,
Yeah.
and which is hard to do, especially as athletes. I didn't do that for many years, and I injured myself often in the process. And, sports are unpredictable in nature anyway, so you can't always prevent injuries. And if you play sports, you're going to get injured at some point. Healing the body and going through these journeys and we're all on different journeys. Mine took its path for what it was with a lot of the physical, mental, emotional stuff. Again, I feel grateful for that because, again, that catalyst helped catapult me and change me into where I am now in terms of my health and fitness. And I'm probably better physically, mentally, emotionally than I have been my whole life. Yeah, it took work, it took time, it took dedication. It's a process that's I've learned to enjoy and the journey, and my mindset has changed quite a bit around how I talk to myself, how I treat
Right.
myself, how I approach my training and my life, that type of thing. So
Let's talk about how you approach training now. Now with everything that you know, with everything that's kind of shaped who you are, with those changes, your hybrid training approach, what does that look like and how would that help an athlete who's trying to get to that next level?
yep. Yeah, so, kind of coattailing on what I was talking about in terms of recovery, changing my way of approaching training, and, what you're talking about with the nervous system and neuroscience is when I started stumbling onto this knowledge and these resources as it pertains to blending neuroscience with movement. That's, kind of why I call it hybrid. At the time, it was kind of funny, hybrid was a big buzzword too, and a lot of people like to say hybrid this, hybrid that, but really what I'm combining is two things: neuroscience and movement, and so
Yeah.
I'm certified through Z Health is one of the main companies I learned from. There's other companies as well: Applied Movement Neurology, Integrated Kinetic Neurology, other various resources. It's brain-based training where, in my opinion, and when you look at the science, it all starts and stops with the nervous system and the neurological systems, the hierarchy of these neurological systems. And so for me, as I started learning how those systems affect not only movement, but reaction, emotions, goal setting, future planning, it all started to kind of make sense. I was like, wow, this is the missing link, I feel like, in
Hmm.
fitness and sports in a lot of ways. And you're seeing it a little bit over the years. You see these high level guys, Steph Curry, LeBron, actually, he trained with Z Health, I believe, at one point years ago. So Dr. Cobb and Z Health, he's kind of one of the pioneers in this field. Steph Curry, you've seen athletes, F1 drivers, some of these guys do some of these neuro training, but it used to be either very specialized to high level athletes or to people who've had maybe major neurological issues to some degree, or vertigo, right, or strokes, or those type of things. And now what we're seeing is this is becoming more mainstream, especially when it comes to like concussions and concussion protocols, giving athletes an edge when it comes to injury prevention, reaction time, that type of thing. And so my approach has been with the neuroscience and looking at that is going after those systems first and foremost, because the brain and the nervous system is the control center of our movement, our muscles, our tissues, all of those things. And if the neurological systems aren't functioning optimally or as efficiently as they could, then your movement, your output, all of those things are going to suffer a little bit, or they're not going to be as good as
Yeah.
they could be, or you'll be more prone to injury, or you'll be much stiffer, or there's a lot of threat signals or patterns or dysfunctions that can arise from a less optimal or a less efficient functioning nervous system and neurological system, or neurological systems. So when I started looking at the visual system, for example, which is when we talk about the hierarchy of the neurological systems, we go visual, vestibular, proprioceptive, right? There's also sensory input. I mean, obviously neuroscience is a very dense, very complicated science. And I try to keep it fairly simple for my clients because, some of them want to learn and I teach them. But, when you start talking about the anatomy and all of the other heavy stuff that goes along with this, it can be daunting for some people to learn and can be a little, well, I don't understand it. It seems complicated, whatever. So in a way, I try to simplify these things and look at just some main areas. Like I said, visual system is one of the areas that I go after first and foremost, often with many people, because our visual system, anywhere from 70 to 80, 90% of the information we receive from the environment is going through our eyes first. And so, what happens is, as you know, right, we have to take in information through our system, through some system, either through the skin, through the eyes, the vestibular system. The brain has to then take that information and process it and do something with that information and then produce an output. So if the information coming into the system is not as efficient or as optimal as it could be, then the processing of that information and the output, movement, balance, coordination, anything is an output. Writing, talking, driving, moving. Obviously as athletes, the output is throwing, running, jumping, catching, whatever those things are, right? If the neurological systems receiving that information aren't, like I said, optimal or as efficient as they could be, then your output might suffer. What I look at is using these systems to help produce better movement, to help people get out of pain, to help people improve mobility, balance, flexibility. And again, as I was saying, I start a lot with the visual. The vestibular system obviously is very powerful, our inner ear, how that affects our balance. Also, it affects spinal stability, proprioception, where we're at in space, where our body is in space. So these systems are highly critical, not only for obviously athletes, but for movement in general when we're dealing with an unpredictable environment, which is life. And when you're on a playing field, that is the ultimate unpredictable environment. You can't account. You're running, you're jumping, you're turning, you're looking, you're catching. You're not thinking about what you're doing, really. You need those systems to be functioning, as optimally as possible so that you can react quicker, you can catch better, you can move faster, you can maybe avoid a collision, you can reduce injury, so all those things play a huge part in how we move. So cerebellum is another thing that I go after with people. Obviously, the cerebellum is highly involved when it comes to movement and coordination and rhythm and function. And I'm very fascinated. I love the cerebellum. I love to talk about because it's like the powerhouse, right? It's 10% of the brain's mass, but holds 50% of the brain's neuron. And it controls, like I said, a lot of what we do movement wise. But again, these systems not only affect us in movement, they affect us psychologically and emotionally as well, which is important, just as important on for an athlete, right? I mean, the physical is one component, but the emotional, the psychological, the mental, those are just as critical, if not more in some cases, for athletes. I mean, for everybody, but athletes especially, when you have to perform under pressure, or you have to, maybe you lose, you have a bad game, you have a bad outing, whatever it is. You need to be able to process that, and training these systems can actually help that. It can help you neurologically, it can help your focus, it can help your goal setting, your determination, how you bounce back from a bad outing or an injury even, because oftentimes athletes get injured and that can drag you down because, as you touched on a little bit before with me, I've had injuries that have taken me out. I tore my pec, I've broken bones, I've had concussions, I've had bulging discs and pinched nerves. That can take you out emotionally and psychologically. If you're an athlete and you get injured, that's really difficult, right? That can be really stressful and can really be something difficult to deal with. So tapping into the nervous system, tapping into these neurological systems can help those things. And I go after that first. That's the first thing I do with my clients and my athlete is I assess those systems, and those are what we focus on in the beginning of the sessions. We do sensory input, we do visual, we do vestibular, we do balance training, we do all those systems to get the nervous system into a flow state, get those things functioning. And what people don't realize is nervous system training can also be very taxing on the system. And so you want to do those things when you're fresh, and the balance work and some of those things so you're getting the most out of them, but you're also priming those systems so then when you go to your movement drills and your strength drills, you're actually online better, your brain maps are better, everything's functioning and firing better, so you're going to get more out of your training.
So getting that nervous system more optimized is going to make all the rest of the training more efficient.
Absolutely. Yep.
So you start with figuring out, are there any deficits? Where are we at with the central nervous system? And then you start working on some of those areas of weaknesses and maybe even strengthening the strengths, and then you apply on top kind of the training depending on what the goal is. So like if someone, let's say, was a football player and a wide receiver and is dropping passes, I know you would have to do an assessment, but what would be one test that you could tell them to do at home to see if maybe it is a central nervous system issue or if it's a neurological based issue versus if it's just a mental issue with game pressure?
Yeah, I mean, those things, they're kind of not, I mean, it's not necessarily mutually exclusive either, in a sense where
Mm.
those things can both have a role where possibly the pressure is affecting, but also too, I would look at the eyes generally in the vestibular system and maybe the cerebellum. I would do some coordinative tests and I would start with the visual system. I always start with the visual system because if somebody's eyes aren't functioning well, that's going to affect their ability to spot something and coordinate catching. So our eyes, our hands, and our feet are how we generally interact with our environment. For a football player that's maybe dropping passes, I would go through most likely some visual assessments as well as like some vestibular assessments and just kind of see what's happening there. And if I start seeing some dysfunction, maybe with some eye movements or some dysfunction with some vestibular movements, one of the best drills, especially for a receiver, anybody that has to keep their eye on a ball, which is every sport basically, and create some
Yeah.
type of a movement, is a VOR kind of test where you keep your eyes fixed on a target and you move your head. Because what happens is, right, when I'm turning, I have to keep my eyes fixed on a target while I'm creating movement and motion. So if somebody has, and then the visual system, because they're tied together, so
Mhm.
vestibulo-ocular, if somebody has a hard time, let's say I have them look up and to the left, right, and all of a sudden they lose their balance, or I'll do a muscle test. So I'll test a strength pattern or a movement pattern. This is the way that we know that, one, just by looking at the eyes, I can tell if maybe there's some dysfunction depending on how the eyes coordinate or how they do the task that I'm trying to have them do, whether it's a fixed gaze, a VOR, a smooth pursuit, tracking an object, something like that. But generally what you do, the real way to find out if this is something that is either an area that needs to be worked on or is a blind spot, for lack of a better term, or something that can be beneficial, is by doing some type of assessment. So maybe I do a muscle test, I do a balance test, some type of a movement test. Could even do a catching test for something very specific, right? Or I use tennis balls as well. So I do a lot of tennis ball training with people. So maybe I have them do a tennis ball reaction drill and I have them do a balance drill and something else. Then I take them through different visual assessments and then we retest those drills and we see what happens. So let's say I have somebody do an eye gaze or some type of a drill and all of a sudden, boom, they get better. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's clearly something, a stimulus your nervous system
Mhm.
responded well to. This is something we need to utilize and train because you got what's called instant plasticity. You got something where your nervous system said, hey, this is good stimulus. I'm going to allow you some type of better movement, whether that's catching, coordination, balance. I might test somebody's mobility, strength. You can test a strength pattern and see if it gets better or worse. And then again, the flip side of that would be, well, if we do a pattern and something gets worse, well, clearly the nervous system didn't like that stimulus for some reason, and now we got to figure out why. That leads me down another path, and then maybe the stimulus was too much. Maybe I needed to reduce the stimulus a little bit and see how we respond to that. Maybe the stimulus was too little. Again, we assess, we do tests, and we reassess, and that gives
Yeah.
us a roadmap to follow. None of this is ever cut and dry. It's very complicated. Sometimes the human body is a guessing game a lot of times, but when you have more tools and knowledge and resources, you can start to lay out a roadmap and start going down. And if something doesn't work, well, maybe you got to take a fork in the road and go the other way. But the more you learn and the more assessments and the more things that you can add to these tests or to these procedures, the better I can understand, well, why is this athlete dropping the ball? What is going on there? And again, as you mentioned, the pressure, and that's what I was saying too. So training these systems, I think oftentimes in fitness, we look at it from a body first approach, and we're starting to link the mind and the body. But these drills not only can help physically reduce pain, improve movement, as I touched on before, these are also highly critical when it comes to performing under pressure, making decisions, reaction, emotion regulation. So the vestibular system is highly involved in helping you regulate your emotions. Same thing with the cerebellum. So if those maybe aren't functioning as well, then the pressure might get to you a little better or a little more. So then, what we can do is, and we've seen this actually. So I've worked with people who've had strokes, who've had TBIs, who have neurological conditions like ADHD, things like that, where when we start training these systems, those things improve as well, because that's what we're going after first. And when those things improve and function better, then movement and output is better, right? So I think really first and foremost, going after the psychological, the emotional is kind of what happens first. Those things start to come online, but we just look at it from fitness because we're an athlete, right? Or we're training somebody with pain. So it looks more like, oh, well, we're just trying to fix the body, not the mind or not the emotions or the psychological, but it's all tied together. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between physical, mental, and emotional trauma or pain or dysfunction. You got to train them all. And it starts and stops, in my opinion, with this type of, the neuroscience and neurological training.
Yeah. And that's kind of why, I wanted to bring you on the podcast was this hybrid approach. I mean, that should be the way we all train from the get-go, right?
Yep.
From the baseline standard, making sure that the neurosystem is optimized, it's in place for you to make successful advances as you get higher and higher in your athletic career. Because not only will you prevent some of that pain with prevention of injuries as much as you can, but you can actually get faster and quicker gains, and you can get to where you want to go much faster. I mean, that's a game changer. There's only so much time in the day that you can train. Many people will overtrain because they're not being efficient, and that efficiency comes from getting that system and the fitness part blended together.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
that's just, it's so big, and it is being talked about more and more now, with Z Health and with many other specialists that are out there. From my standpoint, we do mostly visual system and cognitive training. So we see that every day here in our clinic. Is just that input, when it's incorrect, like you said earlier, we measure their tracking and we see they're tracking 60% accuracy, meaning our eye tracking system, when we put the glasses on, we have them throw, they're off target 40% of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you expect to be balanced? How do you expect to be on target and working on, like getting stronger with your arm throws and velocity when your accuracy is off?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Right.
the
And that's
the
a
input
big
needs to be
deficit.
correct.
And I'm fascinated with that stuff. So what do you guys do exactly with the tracking, and how does that work?
So it's a tracking based on pupil.
Okay.
So you get both right and left, and you can see where the eyes are pointed.
Yep.
And it gives you a tracking metric, a percentage of accuracy, and you get to see how well they're using something called quiet eye versus rapid eye
Yep.
movements. So, just an example like a basketball player, if we want to improve their free throw percentage, I mean, we're not necessarily doing deadlifts, right?
Right.
We're working more so on the eye movements and getting that input accuracy correct. So there was a study done more than a decade ago, and essentially the result of the study was the quieter your fixation, meaning how well can you keep your eye on the target softly without darting your eyes around.
Right.
That is going to increase your accuracy with how well you'll make your motor movement. So if you want better free throw accuracy, you keep your eye on the rim and you don't dart around the rim. Now, the difference between are you actually doing it and do you think you're doing it is actually pretty significant, right? So that's why we need objective data to confirm, are you actually doing it correctly? And there's a way to teach your brain and your body to do it correctly. So that's kind of how that eye tracking system works. But that goes through everything of even what you mentioned, where 70 to 90% of what we take in when we play a sport is visual, whether it's depth perception, vergence, where your eyes need to move in, move out.
Yep.
All of those aspects, amongst many, many more, lead to better eye-hand coordination, lead to better sport performance. And so it's just so key.
Yep.
Yeah, so key.
Yeah.
But if someone's watching this and they're having, a few issues with their sport performance, what's a good starting point? What's a good drill that they can do that may show some of their deficits? And I know that's super broad.
Yeah.
not many athletes have access to me and you
Right.
to have a conversation with or do testing with. So, is there something that you would recommend? Like, okay, why don't you try this drill? If you struggle with this drill, that might point some central nervous system issues that you may need a more thorough assessment with.
Yeah, good question. I would say there's probably two ways I would approach that for somebody that maybe wants to do a little bit of kind of testing on their own, let's say, right? One way would be through some type of a visual drill with a combined with a balance drill. Doing something like a sharpened Romberg stance where it's like you're standing on a tightrope type of a thing, or maybe a single leg balance with some type
Hmm.
of a visual drill or a head movement, a vestibular drill. And if
Okay.
somebody has a problem, balancing, let's say on one leg, and then you could test both legs, see if one's way worse than the other. Some type of maybe a simple balance drill of, like I said, either standing on a tightrope or standing on one leg and either moving your head around, fixing your eyes on an object that's moving, or even closing your eyes. So something along
Hmm.
those lines. And if somebody finds that's pretty challenging, or they struggle with that, that could be a good indication that, something neurologically is going on and needs to be addressed. Often balance drills, again, like I said, sharpen Rombergs or standing on one leg with your eyes closed, or like a Fukada step test where you have your eyes closed and you're marching in place
Hmm.
and you kind of see, are you drifting? I'm getting into a little more here now, but I would
Yeah.
say some type of a balance drill with like a visual or a vestibular kind of coordinated drill, either closing the eyes or kind of moving the head and looking at something while you're trying to balance.
Okay.
The other thing that I would recommend, which I do a lot with my clients and for athletes, is some type of like tennis ball coordination type drill, like getting a tennis ball or two tennis balls
Hmm.
and doing some type of like coordination drills with those tennis balls. And I know that can be a little, people maybe don't understand those. I mean, there's more of those out there now.
Yeah.
But
Well, maybe here's what
like
we can
crossing
do.
your arms and dropping and
Yeah.
trying to catch balls, things like that.
If you don't mind, send me a message with the drill, and then I'm going to try the drill and I'll record it and I'll send it to you. And then you can tell me if I'm doing the drill right.
Okay.
And then we could share it with the viewers. And that can be something that they can try out at home. And we can have both the visual, the vestibular, and the balance component. And then that way they can see where they stand, where all three systems are they working together, or is there maybe a deficit with one or another?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great idea.
Okay.
Because some of the drills I do with the tennis ball, you only need one tennis ball, and you
Yeah.
can really work on like a balance, hand-eye coordination, visual thing. Yeah, and again, like I said too, one of the easiest things to do is a balance drill with some type of head movement or eyes closed or something like that too. But yeah, I'd love to do that.
Okay.
Because that's been a big part of too, some of the stuff that I've posted on my page where people are really, really like tennis ball drills that I post. And those seem to get a lot of traction from young and old, because it's important for athletes, but also as we're aging to continue to play and work on those systems and coordination and balance and posture. And
Oh yeah, and it's so nice with the tennis ball. Almost everyone has a tennis ball that they have access to. So it's
yeah,
easily you could do it anywhere and it can give
yep,
you a little bit of an insight that you may not have if you have to have some of the higher level equipment that we do at at our office.
right. And it's fun, and
Yeah.
it's an element of it's novel stimulus. It's fun. I find a lot of times when I do tennis ball drills with my clients, like they get really into it. And I've done it where I've spent an hour doing those drills because it's just like it's challenging, it's
Yeah.
fun. And if you're competitive, you want to do better. And so great for athletes, obviously, as well.
And I have kind of another broad question, and it'll be one of our last questions. But if you had, let's say, a son or daughter who is in high school and they want to play college level or even pro level athletics, and you were to design their fitness program, how would you design their fitness program? And let's keep it broad. So let's say they're just entering high school and they haven't really picked their sport yet. So it could be anything from like soccer, football, baseball. So something in a general fitness way where they can improve their brain, eye, and body movement and coordination with this fitness program. How would you design it?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I would design it basically how I design it for, anybody that comes to see me, young and old, in a sense, is I would start with, as I talked about, some of the nervous system neurological training. I would have them do, start with some type of breathing. So I have my clients do like a banded breathings where they put a band around them and start working on breathing mechanics, because breathing.
Is that a resistance band?
Yeah, I would use like a super band, like a long resistance band, and I have them wrap it around like their rib cage or their stomach to start to facilitate, rib cage, belly breathing, getting the diaphragm pumping, getting the rib cage to mobilize, which can help for the spine, the T-spine. So breathing mechanics is important. So everybody at any age needs to start training breathing mechanics. That would be a piece of it. I would have them obviously do, the first 10 or 15 minutes of every session with all of my clients, young and old. This is what we start with is neuro. We start with breathing. We start with some type of sensory input, whether that's like a massage gun, rubbing, tapping, bouncing, rebounding, getting that system, the sensory system kind of online, get those tissues kind of woken up and blood flow and that brain body connection established. Then I would have them go into maybe about 10 to 15 minutes of visual training with balance training. So I would start there, because one, obviously we're, especially for a young athlete, you're going to start training those systems very early, working on your breathing mechanics, working on your brain body, your brain maps, your sensory input, and then those neurological systems, because not only are those going to help you physically, they're going to help you emotionally and psychologically through school as you're maybe joining the team or the sport or whatever. And then I combine some type of mobility and activation. So then I would have them do some mobility drills and some activation drills, some core activation, some coordination, getting up and down off the ground, some type of hand-eye coordination like tennis ball drills. So that would be
Hmm.
probably another 15 minutes. So the first 30 minutes would be breathing, sensory input, neurostimulus, and then some mobility and some activation. Then for the next 30 minutes, let's say, because most people train about an hour or so, obviously you can go longer, you can go less, but you really don't need more than about 30 to 40 minutes of specific strength training if you're doing it right. Now, you may be
Okay.
working out with a team or whatever, and they're doing longer workouts and stuff, and that's fine. But what I would recommend is if you do the sensory stuff, the neuro stuff, get all those systems online, the movement patterns, the activations, all that stuff firing up, you're going to get more out of your workouts, and you don't really have to do as much, but you can if you need to. So then let's say the next 30 or 40 minutes or so would be some type of strength training where I always do total body. And I usually do some type of compound movements I do compound movements mixed with isometrics. I think isometrics are very powerful for strength, and just for body awareness, proprioception.
Now, for someone who doesn't know what isometrics is, could you explain that?
Yeah, so isometrics essentially are just kind of like holding tension in certain positions without really moving per se. So either holding a squat, for example, or a split squat, or maybe going halfway down in a push-up and just holding that position. You can do it with bands. I have people do it where they're pushing on a wall and they're just really pushing hard against a wall. And tempo, I definitely use tempo changes. So I have people move very slowly or quickly. I
Hmm.
have them mess around with their tempo. So, the 30 minutes of strength training combines some type of compound total body movements, some rotations. I like to hit all the push, pull, hinge, squat rotation. So it's comprehensive. For an athlete, you need to be moving in all those different ways. Basically, you need to show the nervous system that your tissues can access all these different ranges of motion safely and controlled. So then when you're out in an unpredictable environment, your nervous system isn't as unpredictable. You've moved your knee in that way, or you've moved your ankle, or you've bent your spine or whatever. But yeah, so then my training, like I said, is total body strength training. I combine compound movements with isometrics, maybe some type of a plyometric as well in there. Now, I'm assuming I would be seeing somebody 2 or 3 days a week. So one workout, we might focus a little more on some isometric. The next workout, we might do some more plyometric type stuff. But I'm always doing, some type, it's usually total body, again, working on all those different planes of motion. And that would be, kind of what I would recommend. I don't, excuse me, I don't recommend, bodybuilding style, excuse me, bodybuilding
Right.
style training, especially for athletes. I just don't think it's effective. Yeah, you could gain muscle and strength, but athletes, I think, should be moving in 3 planes of motion, should be doing total body training, and should be kind of mixing up their training with the neuro, with the hand-eye coordination, with compound movements, with isometric movements, changing your tempos, moving very slowly, moving very quickly. So a very comprehensive,
Yeah.
multifaceted approach. Hopefully it's not
I,
too complicated for people. Obviously it's, a little different when they work with us or work with a coach, but got to train the neurological systems. You got to work on that mind body connection, and you need to be doing,
yeah.
coordinative multiplanar movements.
So important. And I love that breakdown because it really gives us insight to what you do with your athletes. But if you had to give a general like overview, I know my take, but I want to know your take. When athletes are going into, let's say, a training session, a workout session, a lot of times you'll see them stretch. Would you also recommend before every training session they do a neuro workup?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that neural warm up, what would that look like for you? Like an easy 10-minute neural warm up that you would recommend before going into a hardcore training session?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I was touching on in the beginning of what I have all my clients do and what I do myself is I do the breathing. So I do breathing
Okay.
first with the band. So I
Can we actually do one exercise with the breathing? We can pretend like we have a resistance band just so viewers know what it looks like.
yeah, I mean I could show you with my hands. So what you would do is
Yeah.
you could take your hands and put them kind of here on your rib cage. And I like to kind of put my thumbs in the back as well because this is cylindrical breathing. So what you would do, and ideally you want to do this all through the nose because I like oxygen advantage nasal breathing. And I think nasal breathing is something we didn't talk about, which is a whole nother topic. Is I think most people should be nasal breathing. Even when you're working out hard, you should be breathing through your nose. So what I would have somebody do is either wrap a band around like their rib cage or their belly, or you can use your hands, and then you just take a big breath in through your nose and you try to fill up your rib cage and fill up your hands, and then exhale through your nose as well. If you have to exhale out of your mouth, if you're not used to exhaling from your nose, you can exhale from your mouth. But ideally, you want to do this in through the nose, out through the nose. And as you exhale, that rib cage would go down, the stomach engages, you get a little bit of activation in the core, and then
Hmm.
inhale, you expand the rib cage, expand the belly. That pumps the diaphragm, that upregulates mechanoreceptors in the rib cage. It can help loosen up the T-spine a little bit if you're tight in that mid back. 4 or 5 breaths of that. Inhale, nice big exhale, so the rib cage goes down. Big inhale, maybe a little pause at the top, and you want to try to really breathe into your hands and feel that you're breathing down here. Oftentimes, a lot of people breathe into the neck and up here. We want to try, that's why I have the hands or the band to get that structural feedback to that area. So I would start with breathing because breathing is one of the most important mechanics that, if not the most important mechanic we have. You can go a couple weeks without food, a couple days without water, only a couple minutes without oxygen. So
Yeah.
we need to breathe better. So getting that going, that also down regulates the sympathetic, the fight or flight, kind of up regulates the parasympathetic,
Okay.
gets you into a little bit more of a flow state. So if you come in and you're all worked up, it's going to calm you down a little bit and get you a little more prepped in that state. And then I would go into some type of like sensory, like rubbing. You could foam roll, you could use a massage
Okay.
gun, activate those areas. Foam rolling gets a bad rap, but I think it gets a bad rap for the wrong reasons. I use it for sensory input, so blood flow
Okay.
and connection. If you rub an area or roll an area or use a massage gun, that's going to bring blood flow to that area, and it's going to light the brain up, and that brain body connection is going to establish better. So if you have an area that you need to work on, rub that area. That's going to help the function of it because the brain is now going to call attention to that area.
So let's say you're doing like a compound movement like legs for that day. You're doing some strength training. So would you take like a lacrosse ball or tennis ball and then rub it against the muscles that you're actually going to work on for that day?
Yeah, you absolutely could. A massage gun actually is very powerful too.
Okay.
So just vibration, because vibration is another powerful technique. It's going to bring sensory input to that area and blood flow and awareness. So your brain is going to light that area up. So a lacrosse ball works, a foam roller or a a massage gun, a foam roller. You can
Okay.
even just tap it, take your fingers.
Just
You can
tap the area.
slap, you can tap, you can rub. We all respond a little differently because I've done different techniques with people. Some people just like light touch, so feathering, take an object or a towel and just feather that area. That can actually be very powerful for pain. If you want to activate that area, one of the best things is either like rubbing, tapping, that type of thing will kind of wake that up a little differently. Slapping a little bit is going to bring sensory input to that area. So I would recommend, if you're going to work legs, maybe you're going to do a heavy deadlift, you might want to slap that area a couple times or give it, a good rub or vibration, wake it up. Even I've used things like a fork or a pencil, something that's a little pointy, and poke that area.
Yeah.
You can poke it. That'll bring
Almost like
sensory input. So
acupuncture a little bit.
yeah, acupuncture. Yep, exactly. Acupressure. So sensory input. And then I would have people do visual drills. Go into, I have about 5 different visual drills that I do: convergence and divergence, fixed gazes where you're just staring at something in different positions,
Okay.
smooth pursuits where you're tracking an object, so a VOR, and then saccades where you're, flicking your eyes back and forth. So I would
Right.
have them go through those in some type of a balance position. So standing on one leg, standing on a tightrope, standing in like a running position, like a gait stance, especially for athletes. If you put them in like a runner position or a gait stance and then have them do visual drills, that's going to light up the foot and the lower tissues of the leg, the
Okay.
calves, the biarticular tissues, it's going to help foot function, which is super important. Again, as I touched on, our feet and our hands and our eyes, how we interact with the environment. So, have them standing in some type of a position and doing some visual drills. Those would be the neuro stuff I would do.
Yeah, I love that neuro warm up because you could literally do all of that within 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And you're activating the central nervous system and you're activating the muscles that you're going to target. So that's going to give you your biggest bang for your buck when it comes to getting a proper training for the day.
Yep. Yeah, because the visual vestibular drills, especially the vestibular drills, they're going to light up the posterior chain and they're going to help the spinal stabilizers. And now if you're doing this in a balanced position or a gait stance, you're going to light up your calves, your tibs, your glutes, your hamstrings, your quads, your core. Everything's going to fire up in conjunction. And that's what I do with the hybrid and I call like neural stacking. Is I have people do these visual and vestibular drills while they're doing like an isometric drill, like a split squat per se, or a balance or a gait stance or something like that, or even in a push-up position. So I like to combine neuro drills with physical drills or cognitive drills. I'll have people walk on a balance beam or on a log and then have them read words while they're walking or do visual drills. So doing those combinations of those things, it just fires up the whole system, fires up the tissues, the brain, everything. So
I could see that being so good for a lot of our sports where you're on your feet and you need really good balance while you're using your sensory system, like your vision, your hearing. I mean, it's so good. Soccer, football, even baseball. So good for any of those. I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah, the auditory stuff as well. I'll have people stand, in a gait stance or a runner position, have them close their eyes and I'll snap and they have to try to touch where I'm snapping.
Yeah.
Or peripheral drills, I'll have them look somewhere and I'll hold an object and they got to reach out while they're staring at something in that athletic position. Or I'll have them do a breathing drill in an athletic position. So that's the other thing that you can look at too, is what positions are you in? Or like a tennis player, maybe in their backswing, and I have them do a couple breathing drills or an eye drill while they're in their backswing or their forehand, or a baseball player while they're coming through, or what a football player, in a long stride or down in a 3-point stance or whatever is going on. You can kind of do a neuro drill or a breathing drill or some type of a drill in these athletic positions and then really fortify that mind-body connection, that awareness, your proprioceptive awareness as well of where you're at while doing an athletic drill. Because we're getting what's called spatial summation, essentially just getting more neurons to fire in the brain. So by combining neuro and cognitive drills with coordinated athletic or isometric drills, we're just getting more neurons in the brain to fire and just a better connection.
That's the key right there.
Yeah.
That's the key.
Absolutely.
Love it. This was too short. I feel like we need way more time.
So
There's
there's a lot we could cover for sure.
I know there's so much, but we for sure will record that drill. So I'll have you send me kind of a description of the drill. I'll record it. You let me know if I did it right, then we can post it. And then we'll do this again because I think there's so much more that we can cover that can help so many people out there, especially just starting to, in a simple way, just starting to incorporate a neuro warm up
Yep.
prior to your training. Not
Yep.
only will that improve your performance for that training, but also it can help prevent injury because you're activating the whole system. Make sure that it's charged and ready so that way you don't have a lapse in judgment when you're performing a heavy lift of some sort. Just so important. I
Yeah,
even
absolutely.
recommend neuro drills, especially vision drills prior to big games
Hmm.
where before a big performance game, we want to make sure that the peripheral vision, especially something called simultaneous peripheral awareness, is totally activated before you step on the field. Because
Yep.
imagine a soccer player who's attacking the goal, if he's shutting down his peripheral vision, well, now his options are limited, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So you need to have that open prior to the game. And there's a lot of things with sympathetic, parasympathetic that,
Right.
that can
Right.
affect these things. So yeah, super important neurodrill activation. There's one takeaway, it's this one. Before
Yeah.
you train, do this neurodrill that Aaron has walked over. I mean, this is just so good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. I agree. And that's, when I stumbled on the science and started looking at this stuff, I was like, wow, this is powerful. I've had a lot of anecdotal success with my clients, but there's also plenty of research and evidence that, this stuff works and it's powerful and what it's useful for. And I tell everybody that like as you were just saying, you need to start every workout, every performance, everything with some neuro drills, getting your nervous system, getting into a flow state, calming the nervous system down, activating those areas, and you're going to perform better. I mean, the research and the evidence is there. It shows it. We're starting to see it now with some of these tennis players. I've seen some videos of tennis players and other athletes
Yeah.
doing these things before major matches and competitions. So absolutely, before a workout, I tell my clients who are business people, before a big presentation, before you have to do something maybe that's a high stress environment, public speaking,
Hmm.
a meeting, whatever's going on, do a couple drills, do a couple
Yeah.
eye drills, take a couple breaths, bounce up and down, do a couple eye drills, and boom, you're going to go into that meeting or that performance ready to go, and you'll be better for it.
It all starts right here, right?
Yeah,
You got to
absolutely. Yeah.
activate it.
Yeah. And we can tap into that. We know
Yeah.
specifically by doing these things, we're tapping directly into those systems. So why wouldn't you? It's a
Yeah,
no-brainer to
exactly.
me, pun intended.
Yeah, why wouldn't you? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Aaron. I
Yeah.
know we
Of
both got to
course.
run, but we'll do
Yeah.
this again. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. I would love to. All right, Akash, I really
Okay.
appreciate it. This was great. And yeah, I'll send you a drill and we'll go from there.
Let's
So it
do
was
it.
really,
All
really
right.
great meeting and talking with you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Cool. All right. Take care.